Fishing a worm is one of the original staples to catching bass any time of the year, but especially in the summer. There are many different types of worms now, many different styles, colors, and today on Bass Fishing Declassified, we're going to go and break down different ways to catch bass with worms to help you put more fish in the boat this summer.
Hey guys, Cortiana here with Bass Fishing Declassified. Real quick, tell you a trick about summertime fishing with a big worm. So here's a little something I do to throw on a big worm that may be something different. You ought to try it. It works really good. But it's to throw a big worm on a swing head. This is the Jimi hard head. In the summertime, you know, a lot of times a big worm is a go-to tactic, especially when you're targeting bass in deep offshore brush piles or brush piles around docks, something where those fish are wanting to exert as little amount of energy for as big of a meal as they can go get. So a big worm is an excellent way to do that. And instead of Texas rigging the worm, or maybe even a Carolina rig, I love thinking about the option of throwing it on a swing head. Now what this does is as it's falling down through that brush pile, the way the pendulum of the head swings, it knocks around, it bumps that brush, and the worm falls freely from the head. And so you get this real erratic action with the falling of the worm. And even when you hop it over rocks and stuff, the head lands and it wiggles and the worm can wiggle. And so it just creates a really unique action that's totally different from a Texas rig or a Carolina rig. And that's why I love trying that. A lot of times those fish have not seen that in a brush pile and you get a few extra bites doing it. Now again, I love throwing the Jimi hard head. They got a 7/16 ounce and an 11/16 ounce. Again, so that's about ½ ounce, 3/4 ounce, depending how deep you're fishing and how fast you want the rate to fall. These both come with a 4/0 hook. So I love throwing the 7/16 and the 11/16 ounce on the Yum Magnum Finesse worm. So this Yum Magnum Finesse worm fits it perfect. And again, you just Texas rig it on there and it works great. Now, if you like a bigger worm, this works really good. Again, this will fit it perfectly with the Yum Magnum Finesse worm. I'm gonna rig it up and show you here. Again, you just Texas rig this worm on the Jimi hard head. You rig it up tight, snug it on there about like that, and just like you would a Texas rig, it's not real complicated. Just like you would a Texas rig, and you just want that hook pointing out of the worm. Obviously you tie to that and you get this nice wobble action with the head, stereotypical of throwing it on a biffle bug. But that worm now, see, I'm hanging onto the head. That worm can swing freely from that head just like that, and it's going to create a lot of cool action as it's falling down through that brush pile. If you want to go with a bigger worm, so the Yum 10.5 inch mighty worm, this is a great big one. You might want a bigger hook than a 4/0. The Jimi hard head comes with a 6/0 hook on the 1 ounce weight. So if you're gonna throw a big worm, you want a bigger weight to get that rate of fall going, this is another really good option. You got a 1 ounce weight, a big old 6/0 hook. And so that gives you an option to throw a big one. If you want to throw the mighty worm, they also got a 10.5 inch ribbon tail worm if you like a ribbon tail. I'm going to throw that set up on a 7/6 Kistler. This is a Z-Bone 7/6. I want a medium heavy or heavy action rod. I'm fishing for big fish in structure. I need to be able to get them out. I'm going to throw it on 17 or 20 pound Seaguard Invisex fluorocarbon. Again, I love the new Kistler chromium reels. I've become very, very confident in these. These are fantastic reels, so buy those with confidence. Performs really great. I love having the wider spool. Anytime I'm throwing heavy line and making long bomb casts in the summer, go with the wider spool. It holds more line. You get a whole lot more distance out of your cast, and sometimes that gets you a few extra bites. So hope this helps you guys. Don't forget, you can get all of these products at lurenet.com. The Yum products, the Jimi products, any of the products that I mentioned that are on there. You can use my coupon code Cortiana15, Cortiana15, saves you 15%, and it helps them know that I'm supporting them and pushing them, so it helps me. So see you guys on the next one.
Oh, there he is. Oh, there he is. Oh man, during the summer, June, July, you know, the dog days of summer, when the fish have already had a lot of pressure offshore, especially here on the TVA. This one isn't a very big one, but he was fun to catch. Oh, come off. But during this time of the year, there's not a whole lot of presentations as far as worm presentations that are better than a drop shot. Now, this is coming from somebody that does not like a drop shot generally, but in recent years, I've really learned to appreciate this rig that just absolutely catches a ton of fish. It's one of those baits that if a ledge bite shuts down, like you're fishing an area, you can't catch them on a spoon, a swim bait, you name it, jerk bait, crankbait, whatever you're throwing that is a lot more fun to catch them on. If that shuts down, this is one of the only ways to get that school fired back up. So, essentially I'm just fishing it very, very slow, just dragging it along the bottom, counting shells, and you're just casting it where you normally would cast something else on these offshore schools. As far as the tackle that I use for a drop shot, and this is more geared towards the Tennessee River lakes or just the southern impoundments in general, it's a little bit heavier than I would do up in like smallmouth territory. But I like a 7-2 medium heavy Versa series rod, spinning rod, and a S4000 reel. Okay, that's the basis for the the base for this whole setup. I use a main line of braided line. This right here is Seagar Smackdown. I use 15-pound test, and I attach a 20-foot 10-pound test gold label leader to that. And as far as the rig itself, there's a couple hook choices. You can do a exposed hook like this, and I'm fishing, shell beds, very open water, nothing to snag on. So that's going to be my first choice, is a nose hook. This is the DSR 132, but you can use like a straight shank finesse hook to be able to Texas rig your bait as well, and that's another option. I like to use a slightly heavier drop shot weight than most guys. I'm impatient. I don't like waiting for an 1/8 ounce weight to hit the bottom, and I certainly don't like to try to feel the bottom. I want to feel that bottom, so I like to use a 1/4 ounce weight. Generally, I use all different styles of drop shot weights, and yeah. So that is kind of the tackle for it. And as far as the overall length of the leader, 12 inches, something around there, 12-15 inches is perfect, for this. But anyways, guys, a drop shot is by far my favorite deep summer a worm presentation. And that pains me to say, because for years I've hated the drop shot, but I'm learning to love it.
Okay guys, in the summer, I love throwing worms. I love throwing the big trick worms. I love throwing the big ribbon tail worms. And I'm going to talk about in my segment on color selection for worms, and also talk about how each worms are just a little different. And then at the end of my clip, I want to share just a little story on picking the size for the worms. I want to say thank you to the guys that have done a one-on-one lesson with me. The past month to 2 months, I've been getting quite a few lessons. I've enjoyed it. And if you'd like to go have a one-on-one lesson with Kyle or Miles, hey, go check it out at fishthemoment.com. It's a joy talking to you guys about fishing and to help you go out and catch more fish. Now, hey, let's talk about these worms. So really quick on worm colors, okay? During the summer, red is a must, okay? For some reason, as that water gets hotter, your plum apples, red bugs, man, they catch a lot of fish. But there's a time where they do not, okay? And then sometimes I know that time is small. So I like to throw some different colors that fish normally do not see. And I have success. One that I had success with the other day, and I'm not going to share the footage with you because I don't want to share the spot I was catching them at. It's on one of my home ponds on Lake Millwood, and I can't really share where I was catching these fish at. But it was the Big Bite Baits B2 worm, and this is in the crime scene color. Okay, now look, the bottom of it's kind of like that plum apple color, but then on top, it's more like a greenish, okay? And then it kind of blends together, all right? I even have it on right here. I have it still on my worm and jig rod. This is my Denali Covert Light worm and jig rod. It's a 7.2 medium heavy rod. But I have it on right here as you see it. It's a little beat up a little bit. Okay, as you can tell, even right here, I had to bite it down a couple times because these dudes were eating it. And how I was actually fishing this, which was something, I'll just share with you guys as I was fishing Millwood, which is a lowland reservoir, but, the river section, there's lily pads. It's a very unique fishery. But let's say you have these lily pads. I was throwing it on the edge of the lily pads, bringing it off and letting it fall right down the sides of the pads. Fish were coming out and eat it. Something I've been doing for a long time. I figured this out on the Arkansas River, but for some reason that end of May to June segment is a great time to do this. You can probably do it in July too, but I've just had more success with it this month. But guys, back to the color. Back to the color, okay? So the reds, I love plum apple, okay? Here's just a plum apple color right here, and now here's just another color though, all right? This right here is the Texas smoke color. It's the V&M Wild Thing, okay? Now, I'm going to talk about this tail in a minute, how this thing's just a little different of a tail. But this is just that kind of a darker color. It has some purple, green flake in there and some gold. So guys, do not be afraid to switch up colors. The black and blue fleck is a good color as well. But like I said, I love my reds, but there's times where you got to switch it up. Okay guys, now the next segment, okay, is understanding how each worm's different. Now I love the Zumo Monster. Zumo Monster catches fish. It's caught some of my biggest fish for me in the summer. It catches them. But it gives different action than these other worms, such as this Big Bite Baits B2 worm. It gives a little bit different action. Last year, when I first started with Fish of the Moment, I did an underwater test. It's on the Fish of the Moment page. I'll put it up as an end screen after my segment. But I went and tested a bunch of different worms. I tested the net bait worm, and guys, like net bait, I have 6 cents worms. I have like right here 10 worms in front of me. I have a lot of different brands of worms. Now, I know not everybody can go out and afford many different brands, okay, but I try to just get a different color, a different type, just to kind of test and learn, because there's been days where like they might not want the Zoom worm, but they want this one, or they might not want this one, and then all of a sudden they want this little guy, which I'm going to talk about later, going downsizing your worms, okay? So it's good just to have different styles to test. For example, this Wild Thing right here, which, man, I love. I learned about this at Lake Fork. It has a big old giant tail, big O, and it kind of gives a little bit different action as it falls down in the water. Now, 6 Cents just came out with their Busa worm. This tail's very thin. It's kind of like similar to that old monster. It's very thin. It gives a little bit different falling action and action as you're moving it in the water as well. 6 Cents has this other worm, which is the Ridge worm. As you see, looks, I mean, it's like a leech looking deal. Smaller body, giant tail. There's not another worm I have out here that looks like this. So this gives it different action as well. Okay, so guys, understanding the worms and how they are underwater can be very key to getting you more bites, definitely in pressured situations. Now let me share you the stories, guys, about this Zoom right here. This is a U-tail worm, okay? This right here is a U-tail. Right here, got this at one of my old stores nearby. It's not closed anymore. If you're watching this, Jamie, hey, here you go. Good stuff right here. All right, so this smaller worm, as you see, this is the Zoom U-tail. It's not the Zumo Monster. It's not, as you see, as big as this Big Bite Bait. Just kind of put them up together, okay? Just so kind of, guys, so you can see. All right. Now, this has happened a couple times. Let's talk about when I was younger, fishing a pond with a buddy. I was throwing the Zumo Monster. Was not getting any bites. My buddy tied on this smaller worm, and he downsized his hook and everything. All of a sudden, this dude started catching fish, and not just dinks. I mean, he's catching like 3 to 4 pound fish, and I'm still throwing my old monster. He caught, I think, 10 fish before I decided to tie one on. So I learned right then, there's a time for some reason that they want a smaller worm. I don't know why. Okay, guys, I'm not saying we're not the fish. I just like try to go catch them, all right? So there's a time they want smaller worms. There's been a couple times fishing lakes to where they want a smaller worm, okay? So guys, do not forget about the smaller worms. I keep these in the box just to remind myself that, hey, do not forget about the small worm. If they're not eating the big one, downsize. Guys, we appreciate you watching. Check out these videos right here, and we will see you next time.